History has seen millions of people live. The number sounds large, but to time itself, it is insignificant. They were born, they breathed, they wanted things, they feared things, and then they quietly disappeared. Most left no name behind. Their faces were forgotten. Their dreams vanished. With the last person who remembered them, thousands fought wars, hundreds ruled nations, dozens built empires. Yet only one man, even 2,000 years after his death, is still remembered by a single word that refuses to fade. Great. This word seems simple, but it carries weight, because great does not merely mean powerful. It does not simply mean successful. To be called great is to be placed above others, untouchable, unquestioned, elevated, not king, not emperor, not conqueror, just great. But this is where we must pause. Alexander the Great did not live the longest. He did not rule the widest lands. He did not build the most stable state. His people did not live the most peaceful lives. So where did this title come from? Perhaps history did not tell us the truth. Perhaps history told us what we wanted to hear, because humanity does not like uncertainty. It does not like chaos. It does not tolerate meaninglessness. It wants order. It wants direction. And very often, it wants a savior. Alexander did not only conquer cities, he conquered belief. And belief is the most powerful weapon humanity has ever created. Empires collapse, cities burn, kings die, but belief survives. Alexander understood this before he ever raised his first sword. Every legend begins somewhere. Alexander's did not begin with a clash of steel, but with a whisper in a child's chamber, quiet, slow, dangerous. From the moment he could understand words, he was told he was not ordinary, not like other children, not like other men, chosen. His mother, Olympias, did not speak like a mother. She spoke like a priestess. She told him his blood was divine, that Zeus himself was his true father, that the world belonged to him. Tell a child these things once, and he will imagine. Tell him 100 times, and he will believe. Tell him 1,000 times, and he will accept it as truth. And then there is no return. But belief alone is not dangerous. What makes it dangerous is the mind that gives it direction. In Alexander's life, that mind had a name: Aristotle. Aristotle did not teach him how to fight. He taught him human nature. He taught him that people do not love truth. Truth is heavy. Truth draws limits. But stories feel liberating. People do not follow truth. They follow meaning. They do not obey facts. They obey stories. That day, Alexander learned this. Fear controls the body. Stories control the mind. And once the mind is taken, the body has already surrendered. Alexander made a decision. He would never be just a man. He would become a story people could not stop telling. Alexander's wars did not begin with swords. They began with whispers. Before his enemies ever saw him, they already felt defeated, because he did not arrive with an army alone. He arrived with a legend. Walking at the front of his soldiers was never an accident. It was theater. It was a message. I am not behind you. I am your destiny. Men do not die for commanders. They die for myths. Every wound he suffered became proof of immortality. Every victory fed the story, and eventually the war was decided before it was ever fought. The Persians did not fall because they were weaker. They fell because they believed less. Alexander understood this. Convince people that you are invincible and you no longer need to prove it, because war is no longer fought with steel, but with the mind. Alexander was not a leader who destroyed, because destruction does not last. He touched people instead, their gods, their customs, their identities, but above everything, he placed his own name. This was not tolerance. It was calculation. Alexander did not wear foreign clothes to show empathy. He wore them to dissolve resistance. He did not respect local gods out of faith. He respected them out of strategy, because Alexander understood something most rulers never learn. Fear creates obedience, but obedience is temporary. Fear demands constant pressure, constant violence, constant reminders of power. The moment fear weakens, the moment punishment slows, the moment the sword is lowered, obedience disappears. Belonging is different. Belonging does not require force. It does not need constant threats. Belonging convinces people that your success is their success, that your survival is their survival, that your victories give meaning to their suffering. Alexander did not want subjects. Subjects obey. When watched, Alexander wanted believers. Believers obey, even when no one is looking. He wanted people to say, I am part of this. I was chosen to live in this era. I witnessed something eternal, because people do not die for kings. They do not die for borders. They do not die for laws. They die for meaning. They die for the belief that their pain matters, that their struggle fits into something larger, that their death will not be forgotten. This is why Alexander's empire was never only geographic. It was psychological. It did not exist merely on maps. It existed inside the human mind, and anything that exists in the mind is far more powerful than anything carved into stone. But belief carries a hidden cost. Belief demands consistency. Once people believe in you, you must never contradict the image they hold. You must never hesitate, never retreat, never appear uncertain. You must become predictable in your greatness, because the moment a god hesitates, faith cracks. The moment a legend doubts, the illusion weakens. And the moment people see a god bleed, they remember something dangerous, that gods can die. At some point, Alexander stopped shaping the story. He stopped directing the myth. He began living inside it. And this is where power begins to rot, because the most convincing lie is the one you tell yourself. Alexander began to believe that the myth was reality, that he was not playing a role, that he was not performing, that he truly stood above other men. He no longer sought loyalty. He demanded worship. Agreement was not enough. Obedience was not enough. He wanted devotion. Doubt became treason. Questions became threats. Silence became safety. Those closest to him felt the change, not because he suddenly became cruel, but because he became unreachable. And unreachable power is the most dangerous form of power because it cannot be corrected. No one challenges it. No one warns it. No one stops it from stepping closer to the edge. History has seen this pattern countless times. The moment a man believes he is above consequence, consequence becomes unavoidable. Alexander no longer conquered the world. He challenged it. He pushed further east, demanded more loyalty, expected more submission. Limits no longer applied to him, and the world always responds to those who forget their humanity in the same way, not with rage, not with punishment, but with indifference, with a body that fails, without explanation, with strength that fades overnight, with silence where power once stood. At 32 years old, Alexander died, not in battle, not surrounded by enemies, not beneath banners and trumpets, but in a bed, sweating, weak, helpless. The god vanished, the man remained, and in that moment, the truth became unavoidable. The empire was not built to survive him, because belief requires a center, and when the center disappears, belief fragments. His generals did not unite, they competed. Allies became rivals, friends became enemies, borders lost meaning, promises lost value. Maps were redrawn by men who claimed his legacy but lacked his myth. Everything he built collapsed with astonishing speed, not slowly, not with resistance, not with loyalty, holding the pieces together, but like something hollow. Cities changed hands, as if they had never belonged to anyone. Armies changed loyalties, as if loyalty had never meant anything at all. The world did not mourn. The world recalculated. Power does not grieve. It reorganizes. Promises dissolved. Alliances expired. Oaths lost their meaning, because oaths are only sacred while someone powerful enough still enforces them. Everything disappeared. Palaces, borders, dynasties. Time erased them all, without hesitation. Everything, except one thing. The story, because stories do not die when bodies do. They die only when they are no longer useful. And humanity still needed Alexander, not as a ruler. Rulers are replaceable. Not as a tactician. Tactics evolve. Not even as a conqueror. History is filled with conquerors. Humanity needed Alexander as something far more dangerous. An idea, an answer to a question we are afraid to ask out loud. Is it possible for one individual to rise above the chaos of the world? Is it possible for destiny to be seized rather than endured? Is it possible for meaning to be imposed on an indifferent universe? Alexander became the proof, not because the proof was true, but because it was convincing. He represented the hope that history can be bent by the will of a single person, even if it was never entirely true, especially because it was never entirely true, because myths are strongest when they sit just close enough to reality to feel possible. Alexander was not great because of what he achieved. Achievements fade. He was great because humanity needed him to be, because in moments of uncertainty, we do not look for accuracy, we look for certainty, and perhaps that is the most uncomfortable truth of all. We have not changed. Technology evolved, weapons changed, empires rose and fell faster, but belief remained untouched. We still search for figures larger than ourselves. We still turn people into symbols because symbols are easier than systems. A symbol does not ask us to act. It asks us to watch. So we elevate, we simplify, we mythologize, and then we ask the same questions again and again. Who do we call great today? Is greatness measured by power, by visibility, by repetition? Who do we defend, even when contradictions appear? And as we follow, as we admire, as we surrender, our judgment, who is walking ahead of us, a leader or a reflection of our own need to believe? Perhaps the true danger was never Alexander the Great. He was only a man placed into a role no human can safely occupy. Perhaps the danger is humanity's endless hunger to believe in something larger than itself, to worship someone so we do not have to confront uncertainty, to surrender responsibility to a story, because stories do not ask us to act, they ask us to watch. And as long as that hunger exists, there will always be another Alexander, another myth, another legend, another beautiful lie. This was Night Voyage, and on the next journey, we will descend into another shadow of history, not to find heroes, but to understand why we keep creating them. Crescent Moon.